Welcome back to the Soul Canvas podcast. This is the place to be possible. You know that in each episode, we talk about what life is possible for us by saying yes. Yes to healing, to fun, adventure, new beginnings. And today, yes to authenticity. I could not be more excited about the guests that I have for you today in this conversation. No one embodies this more than my delightful friend, Fabienne Fredrickson, for more than 20 years as the founder of Boldheart, has mentored tens of thousands of women business owners. I count myself among those lucky women. And these women generate tens of millions of dollars a year in their businesses as a result, with a profound sense of fulfillment and freedom. And Fabienne, first of all, thank you. Thank you so much for being with me today to be in this conversation.
I am literally, every cell of my body is celebrating you, so grateful for you, and really thrilled about this message that you're putting out about possibility and what we're going to talk about today. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, you know, when I was charting out, mapping out the podcast, when I knew, because I had, as you know, attempted podcasts, attempted shifts in my business through COVID, et cetera, and with the podcast in particular. And I would step up to it, kind of get into it, and then step away. It wasn't the thing. It didn't feel true to where I thought I was going, but I didn't really know where I was going anyway. And when this one happened, it felt very true, very authentic. And as I was mapping out the subjects and the subject of yes to authenticity, I was like, I have to talk to Fabienne. She has to be the person that I had this conversation with. And for our listeners, our viewers, the reason, a little backstory, folks, Fabienne, I've been working with Fabienne. She's been my business mentor now since 2014. And so I've also witnessed your not evolution, but your journey with here's what I've been doing and here's what I'm doing next, and how is that going to be accepted, I guess. Is that a fair way to put that?
Absolutely. I feel like I'm often on the edge of what else does alignment look like for me, authenticity, and will I be accepted? Will they like it? What if I'm making a terrible mistake? Because, I have done pretty well. Why rock the boat?
Yeah.
Why try to fix what isn't broken? And yet there's that stirring of the soul that I'm meant for more. And I don't mean more accumulation, because I've had that. You've been in my world for a while. You've seen the accumulation that I've been able to experience. It's not about that. It's what I'm meant for: more alignment, more authenticity, more impact, more juice, more fulfillment. Even fulfillment doesn't seem like it's big enough. Just more purpose.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm continually looking at what is trying to come through me. What is authentic? What part of what I'm living right now is not as authentic as it used to be?
Yeah. So when I joined your business mentorship program, it was the client attraction system at that time. And I was certainly living in a very, I say inauthentic, because for me, being true to ourselves takes a high level of awareness. I think even without a high level of self-awareness, people know when they're vibrating out of alignment. They may not have the same tools as, people who've been immersed in personal development to do something with it. But I had moved to New York City after my divorce. I had pieced together this business that really was solely dependent on what was in my brain and what I could make up at the time, because I could do some fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
And when I met you, right, you were solidly in client attraction. You lived in the United States. This is what we do. We go quarterly up the road. And my level of inauthenticity, as far as like, I didn't really know who I was next. I
Mm,
just knew that I was no longer the married person back in Denver farting around with this business. Now I was square in the middle of this. Who the heck am I? Right? Was there a time during that time for you that as you were moving, again, that time you had client attraction, you're living in Connecticut doing your thing. Did that feel inauthentic for you at all?
it didn't at the time because I believe I was living my life firmly entrenched in the keeping up with the Joneses, and that's just what I thought. We I'm embarrassed to say that, but I did that whole thing. I mean,
Mm,
you were around, but it felt lovely at the time, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, more toys and more all of that." And then as I took my spiritual practice even deeper, I started questioning, what is it that does make me happy?
mm,
What are the things that I value? And what I noticed is I put my value in external things
mm,
because all of society seemed to say, and even my clients seemed to say, no, you need another Chanel bag and you need another, a convertible and or like whatever that. And you know me, I love the Chanel, but I'm actually questioning all of that. So, like, going back to then, the more personal growth and development work that I did, and the more spiritual development that came out of that, the more I started to say, well, whose journey is this? Whose dream is this? Who's next
mm,
is this really? Or are you just borrowing from what society says? And
mm,
that's when I started having a, a, a dark night of the soul. It wasn't a dark night of the soul in the beginning. It was a light night of the soul. I don't know how you say that. In essence of like really questioning, like, I seem to have it all, but why is there this yearning, this
mm,
stirring, this I'm not satisfied? And then people would say to me, well, is it ever going to be enough for you, Fabienne? Do you just always
mm,
have to have more? It wasn't that, Jen. It was, I think the shoulds were being fulfilled, but not the the soul part.
yeah.
And so it became an exploration of, what do I want? What are my values? What are my
Mm,
unmet needs? Why am I pleasing everybody else and not looking at what authentically fulfills me? And that has been a journey ever since.
yeah. And what I want you to know is that during that time when I first met you and you were in Connecticut and things were rocking along in that way, you provided an exceptional space for all of us to come literally to land in Connecticut quarterly. Of course, we had all the things in between, but when we landed up there each quarter to be in community with each other, there was a unmistakable sense of authenticity to that. I knew that where you were in your life at that time was where you chose and wanted to be in your life, stirring or not, to something else, um, which was so beneficial for me because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And
Yeah.
until I got that leadership in packaging my brilliance and bringing it in a big way. And of course, we all know my business, exploded from there once I could say, and I don't know if you remember, we were in Connecticut and I was like, well, what I really want to do is, call it Mindful Leaders Academy and really teach this mindfulness thing to corporate people, but I don't think they'll pay for it. And you were like, well, what if they will?
Mhm.
I don't think anyone had ever, in a business sense, asked me that kind of question. And it turns out I had actually registered mindfulleaders.com
Years before. Yeah, years before.
sometime before. So when and I bring all that up because I want our listeners our viewers to really get that wherever we are, right? And that the journey for me, and I know for you, has always involved this spiritual component, whatever that means for you, that's where that stirring comes from. Because I think we're all trying to be as authentic on any given day as we can be with what we have and what we know and all that. And when we take the time to pay attention to those stirrings, like, oh, where's that coming from? What is that? What do I need to do with that? And then lean into the tools and the mentorship and the people that we have, that it's okay, in other words, to be in that place where we're not particularly sure, and confident that there is a next step to be taken with the right tools and such. So what was the stirring then that made you decide you're in Connecticut and the next thing we know, you're going to Paris with the
It
family?
was, oh my gosh, I had started to look around and say, all these people at the club I belong to don't get me.
Mm,
They they're I can't seem to break in. I've been part of it for years. I look at all of my friends, and they're all European, or they're in a couple that's half American and half European. And I started thinking, like, why can't I? For some reason, something was just missing all around, even though everything was perfect on the outside. And then I started reading vertically. And I read about this once. I was like, vertical reading? What does that mean? And for me, I read, what is the it factor of a French woman? Or what is the Parisian French woman? I read like just dozens and dozens and dozens of books. And just so, for those who don't know me, I was born and raised in France. My parents divorced when I was 8, and I moved to the US when I was 10, and I had to learn English. And then I was massively bullied, which will come back to this authenticity piece in a second. It's actually a core component of how do you live authentically and not be scared. All of that to say, I started thinking, like, you know what? Maybe this isn't my life. Maybe Derek, my husband, Derek, and I, and the 3 children could just go and experience France for just 1 year.
yeah.
And it took us 18 months to reverse engineer the process
Mm,
and deal, because we had to, just the house and the schools and the, all the
yeah.
things, and the team and the clients, and
Yeah.
and we told no one, Jen. We didn't
Mm,
tell our kids and our family until just like 3 to 5 months until move date. But this had been something that felt authentic to us.
yeah.
And then 2 days after we moved to Paris, I woke up in a cold sweat and I was like, what have I done?
I bet.
This is crazy. And the kids were saying, why are you doing this to us?
Mm,
Now they're happy. They're the ones who ended up asking to stay. But I'll say this, there was this unmistakable angst. I keep calling it a stirring. I call it now a divine discontent,
I love that. I love that.
which I did a whole episode on my podcast about that. Uh, and there's this knowing that something is off. And what I've realized since is it can be very, very scary to be authentic. In fact, I put a post out just recently, and one of the comments from a woman was along the lines of, yeah, I get that you want to be authentic, but it is so damn scary. And so I relate that back to, it's not safe to be you.
Mhm,
In my life, it's not safe to be you because you will be heavily bullied for years.
mhm.
You will not have friends for years. You will be rejected and cast out from the tribe. And if I'm being honest, and you know this because you know my
Mhm.
heart, the
Yeah.
last few years, there's been an increased stirring. And I too, for 2.5 years, delayed my podcast
Yeah.
First, I called it Having It All, and then I wanted to call it the Leveraged Business Podcast. Then I wanted to call it A Delicious
Delicious
Life.
life.
Yeah, that you know this, right? And finally, because I couldn't accept through fear, I couldn't accept being my most authentic self because it was as if I was going to break apart or break open my rib cage and show my heart too much.
Yeah.
And that would be open to the trolls and the haters, to something that is so sensitive as my most authentic heart.
Yeah.
And then I launched it nonetheless, because in the end, what when it comes down to authenticity, I have realized that I am unwilling to live a life. So I'm about to turn 54 next week.
Mm.
And this season of my life, I am unwilling to live inauthentically. Scared or not,
Yeah.
F it.
Yeah. Because isn't it scary not to?
It's I could do it, but I would put my head on the pillow at the end of my life and say, "Oh, no, give me just a few more years."
Mhm.
But in hospice, there's been a book or a study, I don't remember the name of the book, is like the biggest regret that people have in the last few days, weeks, hours of their life is, could I just have a little bit more time to
Mhm.
live my authentic dream, to do the thing I've always wanted to, that I never allowed myself to be, do, or have. And so I am unwilling to get to that point and be like, I regret not going for it. I regret having the haters or the trolls or
Mhm.
society keep me in my small box. And some people think I'm crazy.
But,
Some people,
isn't that so much about everybody else, right? The trolls, the haters, the naysayers. When you launched your podcast, The Fabienne Show, and I was driving, I was on a little bit of a road trip to South Carolina, and I put it on in the car, and you had talked about, you've been fighting The Fabienne Show since you were like 7. Of course, I, like, burst into tears because 'cause I'm like, "Okay, me too." And then not safe to be you for whatever reason. I mean, in my life, my parents promoted my first trip to New York City when I was 14, then when I was 16, then I moved there when I was 18. And they were like, yay, go, watch your back. But nobody checked on me. And so it really wasn't safe to be me because
mm-mm.
I would show up for these great opportunities and look around and make bad choices. Like then my addiction and it helped me make massively bad choices. So I come into my adult life and I'm going to be 63 this year. Who knew?
How did that happen?
I know it's crazy. It's crazy. Um, and it's only been recently, but as a result of having people like you in my life who continue to advocate for this, like what really feels real and true and good for you, independent of everybody else, that I was like, oh, because I didn't feel like it was safe to be me, because I never had people checking on me to say, hey, are you okay out there in New York City at 14? I
Yeah.
was not. That I was able to listen. I'm listening to your podcast and I'm like, oh my God, I've been operating from this kind of half-assed thing. And by the way, I do great shit in a half-assed mode.
Yeah.
What the heck is possible for me if I finally go, it's really about me. My choices are written. Of course, I make choices in not deference, but in support of what matters to me. My family matters to me. I want to be in a, freedom of time and location, space that you taught me and all of that. And I guess it has been in deference to other people's expectations until very recently. And for our listeners, I'll make sure it's in the show notes that they go to your podcast, The Fabienne Show, because your willingness to embrace The Fabienne Show was like, yes, that's it. That is it. That is it.
And if I look back at the show and the comments that people have made to me, it's the first episode, which is all about like who am I to have a podcast called The Fabienne Show? Because I've been too much all the time. Don't, calm down. You're not the Queen of Sheba. Like, why? And it was like, wait, why? Of course I should call my podcast The Fabienne Show, but this, who do you think you are message?
Yeah.
It's like, who are you, Oprah? You're not Oprah, right?
Mm.
And then the divine discontent one, but it's also the focaccia incident one. And I'm mentioning these 3 episodes because they're the ones that really spoke to most people. And I have this message because I have this thing for myself: is how good can you have it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when is it? And the people, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, people will say, when is it going to be enough? But I want to flip that around in a positive way and say, how good will you allow yourself to have it?
That's right.
How authentic will you allow yourself to be? How delicious will you allow your life to get?
Hmm.
Where do you stop and why? And it's almost always, Jen,
Yeah.
worrying about what people will think, people pleasing,
Yep.
diminishing yourself, being too nice. We as women, especially, but the patriarchy affects everyone, including men. We as women, especially, are raised, reared, and bred to put the needs of others and the feelings and thoughts of others before our own.
Yeah.
And so we allow other people to use us to feel better about themselves.
Yeah.
And we deny ourselves our full authentic expression.
What was the toll that took on you when you were not living fully into the version of yourself you wanted? What was the toll that took?
I think, if I'm being honest, I was numbing myself. And I think it's, we all have our way to numb, but there's this, what I noticed for myself and then for others is, you wake up at a certain point and you say, is this really all there is to life? And you feel so guilty because you look
Mhm.
around like, people would do anything to have what I have, and the guilt and shame, and yet you want more. But
Yeah.
it's like, somehow it's not it. It's like my first job. I always wanted to work for Food and Wine magazine selling ad space. I got that job when I was like 26, and I'm like, this isn't it.
Yeah.
And this is, so it's, what I will say is, I've seen so many women walk around like a zombie in their lives, being like, I'm giving my life, my essence, my chi, my energy to my work, to my spouse, to my kids, to my PTA, to my neighbors, to society. And I'm like, not even filling my own bucket. Who am I really? And what do I really want? And what really makes me happy? What is authentic happiness for me? And
Yeah.
dare I put my ear to my heart and listen hard? And dare I boldly go after that? And many people don't, because in isolation, there is self doubt
Mm. And contempt.
and contempt and guilt and shame. And so when people go to someone like you or to someone like me and join a community or get some support, we suddenly don't feel so alone
Yeah.
and become more daring and, however cheesy this sounds, more bold hearted
Yeah.
to take the steps that we would normally not take on our own.
It's the it's the trying for me that's so delightful. The advocacy that you bring to the world, Fabienne, around, and I'm on mentorship calls with you in the Bold Heart program. Try this, try that. And I think so many of us have these notions, have these ideas, have these stirrings, if you will, but we like don't want to make a move unless we know for sure that making that move is going to turn out the way we want it to turn out. I want to come live in Paris for 3 months next year.
Lucky
If I
me.
if I get hung up on, I don't know if I can rent my condo while I'm gone. Where I've got all my shit in here. Like, how am I going to paint over there? And if I let that simply be the worry that stands in the way of that dream, here's the thing, right? And you'll appreciate this. And our listeners, I hope you all are getting that we all have these stirrings, right? And the steps with those stirrings are to turn those concerns, those worries into quality questions. How can I get there? Not, oh my God, how am I going to get there? How can I best create the network, the environment, the language, what all the things are? Like, because people are doing this. We were talking to Marsha Weeder on your podcast. I'm like, damn it, that woman is living my life. She's painting in Paris. Well, she's not the only painter in Paris, Jennifer. Go be a painter in Paris. Go
That's
do
it.
that, right?
Yeah, go ahead, finish, and
No,
then
no,
I have.
no. It's just that. Like, it's the trying of it. Because the worst case scenario is that I never answer that call, which, by the way, has been on my heart since the first time I went to Paris in 2014.
Mhm.
And not as a painter, because I didn't figure that part out till a couple of years ago. And why not? Like, if I don't do that, if I don't give that a try, that will not be acceptable to me. I have to try.
Yeah,
I have to try.
and I'll tell you why I hope this serves. I'll tell you why I try lots of stuff, and sometimes it doesn't work, and I'm, like, embarrassed or humiliated or, "Ugh, why did I do that?"
Mm,
Is we already talked about I'd regret it if I didn't try it, but what I discovered a long time ago is, like, I can fall flat on my face. I have been brutally rejected before. I'm sure you have too, a lot of us have. I have, lived some pretty tough things because I've tried things that didn't work or it's very uncomfortable for people when I dare sometimes I intimidate people with my bold heart.
mm,
"No, who does she think she is?" But what I know about myself is at the end of the day, I like me.
yes.
And so if I fall flat on my face and everybody leaves or everybody says something or the troll
Mm,
person, blah, 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 at the end of the day, when nobody's with me, it's me, myself, and I. And I like me now. I
mm,
did. If you read my first book, Embrace Your Magnificence, it's a whole journey of self-acceptance, self-worth, climbing back from the wreckage of not, like, even accepting myself, and now that I'm at this place of accepting myself, I'm like, "Okay, I'll lick my wounds, I'll cry, and then I like me, and that's who I'm left with." So, all of that to say
mm,
I'm okay with trying things that might fail. I'm not always looking for the total certainty or the how. Listen, the podcast was a big thing, right? I was also going through menopause. I was questioning myself all the time,
mm,
2 or 3 years, and being like, "What is going on?" But once I got on the other side of that brain fog, I was like, "You know what? Screw it.
yeah.
Let's call it the Fabienne Show. Let's do this thing, even if it makes other people get whiplash. Like, what is she doing again?
Mhm.
Because I want to,
Yes,
because it gives me pleasure.
that's right.
I
And
just want to.
I think it's really, I want our listeners to get that having people in your life, like me having you in my life is a game changer. It's a game changer because when I am sitting somewhere and contemplating going to an artist retreat in Morocco for a week, and my brain starts going into like, well, you don't really need that, or like, what is it? Like, it's a lot of money, and I go, okay, true story, whatever. Like, what's possible by saying yes to this? What's possible by saying yes to a retreat in Provence? Which, by the way, please let me know the dates in the spring because I'm coming.
Yeah, okay.
What's what's possible? And that's what led me to this podcast. all the best things in my life have come from answering the call of what's possible if I say yes? What's possible if I go forward, right? And so what else has come out of saying yes? I know the podcast, what else?
Just, even looking at how good can I have it on a fulfillment level in business. I
Mm,
have really nice business. It's all leveraged, it's all systemized, it doesn't require like a ton of new effort. And yet inside, I want to put more authenticity. I want to put more supportive women, like raise the feminine energy and part of me says, Fabienne, you're good, man. You did it. Do you still need to push the envelope? Yes, because the question I want to ask myself every day, for you, Jen, to ask yourself, for everybody here who's with us, is how good will I allow myself to have it? How authentic can I be in my expression in the world?
mm,
How aligned can I be with my heart and my soul's purpose and the thing that wants to come through me? And so I don't want to live another 20 years doing business like this. And it's already amazing.
yeah,
I want to know what's the next level of deliciousness that I can bring forth in my business, in my life, in my marriage, with my kids, with where I live, all the things.
yeah. And is that something then that you encourage people to like take those questions and sit down and journal them? Or
Yes.
what do you do with that?
Here's the two questions I would have you write down is how good will I allow myself to have it? And where do I stop and why?
Mm,
If you were to give yourself 30 to 60 minutes to actually truly answer those questions, is it mom and dad who wouldn't let you dream a bigger dream? Is
mhm,
you can't figure out the house, you're not going to try because you're afraid of disappointing someone, or because you were in corporate and it had to be perfect, or you had a fear of being fired or ridiculed? Is it that you are afraid that you'll be cast out of the tribe? What are all the reasons why you don't allow yourself to be, do, or have that thing that wants to come through you so desperately, that beach ball that you've been pushing down into the
mm.
water with such force for 25 years because of what they will think? Those are the questions I want you to ask yourself.
Ah, magnificent. You, my friend, magnificent. Well, as we wrap up this conversation, and I could literally talk to you all day long about this, any parting words for people that are second guessing whether or not they're living authentically?
You've heard me do this, Jen, where I'll be on a Q&A call and somebody is asking me, they're really asking me a permission question. And my answer is always, you don't need my permission. You can just give yourself permission. They're like, no, Fabienne, I need your permission. I'm like, pick up your phone. And that was like, my phone? I'm like, yeah, grab your smartphone. You've seen me do this. Put your phone to your ear, call up the divine, whatever you call that energy, and ask, do you want me to stay stuck in something that doesn't feel authentic to me? Or would you, divine source, energy, God, goddess, universe, infinite intelligence, do you believe that I am worthy of more, in alignment, something? And what is the answer? And the answer is
Mm,
always the same.
do it.
Do
Do it. Oh,
it.
brilliant. I love you so much.
Me too.
I thank you so much for everything you brought to my life, everything you brought to this conversation today. I'll make sure, folks, that you have all of Fabienne's information in the show notes about how you can connect with her, get to a Delicious Life retreat, get to Provence, get online with Bold Heart, get to the podcast. 100% life changing woman, life changing information. Thank you so much, my friend.
You're my friend. Thanks.